to this CNBC Africa Captains of Industry. My name is Mugisha. Today, we sit down with 52-year-old Robin C Bairstow, the Managing Director of I&M Bank Rwanda. He has rather some big influence on the market, but also his experience goes way back to at least maybe 20 plus more years in the banking industry. He's done a lot of years in Rwanda, a lot of years in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, moving all the way to Southern Africa. We sit down with him to look at his life and the upbringing and the person that he's actually become, and of course looking back at the investment that we saw bringing I&M the accolade of Investor of the Year at the Rwanda Development Board's 2018 Business Excellence Award. Today on CNBC Africa's Captains of Industry, right here on CNBC Africa, first in business worldwide. Thank you very much for getting time to speak to us, Robin.
Oh no, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Michael.
It's interesting that we have a few things in common that we like. Of course, football being the first one, Arsenal there. But we won't start from that beat. We'd like to take the story way back, of course, at the very beginning of you as a person, your life and the early age. What was it like, and how did it mold you into the person you are today?
I think in terms of my the influence that it had on my upbringing, I'm a child of an expatriate. We moved around quite a lot. I spent some of my high school period at school in the US, and then settled down. Spent a bit of time. I like to say, messed around with boats for a while, and then found myself in banking. And I think a lot of the areas, especially having spent time within at military school, within the Navy, I think molded me in terms of from a discipline point of view, in terms of making sure that you understand the basics well, the practicalities of life, and I think those parts have had the most influence on me and my upbringing.
Military school. So you served in the military? Is that what you're saying?
The school was a military school, so it had we wore uniforms, and had to do marching and such like. It was an interesting, maybe a different take on what one usually sees as high schools in the US.
If I'm counting well, 52 puts you back in the time of apartheid in South Africa, right? Talk to me about growing up in that time.
I think the nice part about it is that we were the generation that worked on the change. That was part of the requesting for change. If you look at it, we went through the periods of sanctions, which started in the late 80s, and then part of the movement for change, which culminated in the unbanning of the ANC in 1990. So as part of that, I'm proud to be part of that generation that were the ones that asked the questions, that pushed for change, that made sure that we have a different world that we have now.
All right, Robin, maybe something that I picked up on the way to your house is that you have a lot of, I don't know if I can call them antiques or just you are a collector or something. What is this with you and, sculptors and art pieces everywhere, like basically scattered everywhere?
No, it's not really, and it's just, we like to keep a small record of where we've lived, and we've been very fortunate. We've lived in a number of countries around the world, primarily across Africa, but also we spent some time in Southeast Asia, and I think it's my wife's keen eye. But we've also tried to at least support local artists wherever we've lived. So we buy a piece in each country. I have to admit, we haven't bought anything from Rwanda yet, but we're on the lookout for something that catches our eye, and I think it's made a nice eclectic decor for our house.
There is something that is right behind me, and I think you called it Admiral.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
That's from a village market in Kenya, and we just liked him because he reminded us of the captain of the ferry that used to move from Kampala on Lake Victoria. And he just was a bit of a character. The same as you'd see in the entrance to the house. We've got Captain Darling that stands guard. That was a birthday gift, but he also is a little bit of a character in our house. I think kind of shows the fun side of things.
You said Captain Darling was given to you when you turned 30.
Yeah.
That is almost 22 years ago, and you still have him at the doorstep of your house. That's rather very great to actually have something like that keeping around.
Well, he's moved with us he's moved with us around the world: Uganda, Indonesia, Zambia, Kenya. So he's been at the portal for all those years. He's looking a bit weather beaten now, and he's aged quite well.
All right, let's talk about the time before you joined I&M Bank, of course, in Rwanda. Just a little bit back, you said you worked for Standard Chartered, and this was about for 14 or if not 16 years. What was this time like, and what are some of the few things that you can say stood out in your profile?
Well, I think each of the territories that I worked in had a unique contribution in terms of development of my career and my understanding of banking, and from commercial banking, transaction banking, corporate finance. So if we look at, I got to Uganda at the time when there was a lot of privatization taking place, and I worked on a couple of privatization deals. Then I moved to Indonesia. We did a merger with, or we merged some systems with between Standard Chartered and Permata Bank. Going to Zambia, having a strong influence on development of the mining sector. As the mining sector came into its own, copper prices rise, and at the same time looking at the farming sector within Zambia. And if we look at some of the size of the transactions that were done, supporting the Food Reserve Agency, $100 million financing for the Food Reserve Agency, at least $1 billion at one of the mines, sinking shafts or financing the sinking of shafts for mines. Going to Kenya, been part of the initiation of the first ever it's balance of payments financing that was a precursor to the first sovereign bond that took place in Kenya. So all of that added to I suppose the richness of the background that I have within the industry.
Robin, that sounds rather interesting and very adventurous. So I don't know if you just got bored of it and decided to take up the position as managing director at I&M Bank, or what was it? Is it your calling that you're like, you know what, let me leave Standard Chartered and go find something else in Rwanda?
No, it's the opportunity came up. I met we were banker to the bank. The bank that I worked at previously was a banker to banks, and we were the main banker for one of the main bankers for I&M Bank. So I knew the company. It was well respected, a solid tier 2 performer in the Kenyan market. I met with the senior management. I liked them, they liked me, and they made me the offer. And I thought Rwanda, we had been covering Rwanda from Kenya. I had some idea of what was going on in the country, but I wish I knew more, because we would have done more. I think you get to know a place when you in situ, and even, I mean, let me just with the slight segue. Even when we visit and we travel for vacation, I'd never like to be a tourist. I'd rather be a visitor. You want to experience the countries, so you have a whole different viewpoint when you've actually lived in a country. And Rwanda on the outside, you read the good articles, you hear the nice things, the development, the rate of growth, the enabling environment that has been created. But to actually be here on the ground, looking at the way governance is compared to other developing markets, it's just so far removed from that in terms of the development, how far ahead it is. And that kind of intrigued me.
All right, your journey with I&M began about maybe 3 to 4 years ago, right?
3 years ago.
3 years ago.
Yeah.
And for the time that you've been here, what are some of the significant things, maybe? I don't want to call them milestones yet. You can put it in your own terms if you feel that it's fit for that particular one. What things do you think have been so critical for the bank in the past 3 years that you've been here? As you say, maybe before, we weren't there yet.
We have to first look at the platform, and there was a investment required within the platform of the bank. And we looked at, first of all, making sure that we had a stable environment, making sure that when customers use our systems, use our ATMs, that the systems work. And I think within the first couple of months, realized that that was going to be order of business number one. We've done so. I mean, we had a rejection rate at one stage of 80% of transactions that were done on our channels, especially our cards, point of sale. We reversed that to be an industry leader within little more than a year. Just the work that was done on that. Then we knew that we had to change the core banking system, so we started a process as well with re-looking at our infrastructure, our architecture. I joke with my team that parked downstairs in our server room, we have 2 Bugatti Veyrons. That's the kind of money that we've spent. Now, people get all excited about Bugatti Veyrons. They don't really get excited about computer equipment, but that's what it was. And it included wiring, changing switches, upgrading the infrastructure so that when we came in with the new software, we were able to carry it. So that journey started 3 years ago, or maybe 2 years ago. Then we have to look at the obviously.
You spoke about the Bugatti Veyrons, but I want you to quantify this in monetary terms. How much are we looking at?
Roughly, just on license, hardware, etc. Infrastructure, architecture, roughly $2 million in itself. And then the core banking system, that was a further close on $4 million that we've invested in there, and we're continuously investing.
We understand that for maybe a year and a half now, you've been using the IFRS 9 provision system. How has this helped you with the non-performing loans and looking at how you report your financials?
Well, in terms of before IFRS 9 came out, there was regulations that came out from the central bank with regards to provisioning, which some banks chose to run parallel books. We implemented it immediately and ensured that we provided per the requirements, which was 1% on your class 1 and 3% on your class 3 loans. The impact of that is that when IFRS 9 rolled out, we had very little in terms of adjustments to make. We've always been prudent with regards to our provisioning and made sure that we were well provided for. If you look at the impairments within the bank and the evaluation that we did during the course of last year, our provisioning is actually becoming, our provisioning requirements have reduced over the period. So it hasn't had a major impact on us. Obviously, it has an impact on an overall globally, but because we were prudent in terms of our planning for the introduction, it didn't have a major impact, especially going from 2017 into 2018 when the new regulations came into being in Rwanda.
Robin, when we last spoke, maybe a week ago, you touched base with some of the new things that I&M is venturing into, and of course that means sector growth there for credit towards the SME and touring around the Kivu belt? One at a time. Maybe we'll start with SMEs.
So last year we raised $10 million for SME funding. We specifically targeted SMEs because that's a growth sector within the market. We see development happening. Unfortunately, it's a sector which struggles with financial record keeping. So your credit selection criteria, your credit acceptance criteria has to be a little bit different from the way you assess a corporate customer. And you cannot assess a small company and just say, well, the credit assessment is like a small corporate. So we are in the process of going through a change in the way we approach our SMEs, the way we assess the risk within the SME sector. Our impairments at the moment are well controlled, specifically within that segment. We'd like to maintain that, but we've got appetite to take a little bit more risk because we understand the sector in which we're operating.
Where do you stand with non-performing loans currently?
Overall, non-performing loans are 2.5%, and that's possibly one of the better placed banks within this market.
Back to that touring beat of our course of the Kivu belt, I just want to bring in something very personal though. You have a photo of yourself and two other gentlemen on bikes, cycling bikes. Is this project built on passion that you have for cycling and touring and all this?
It's one of the areas, and what we looked at, and it's something that evolved. We were approached by a donor organization who wanted to make a change in that market. We decided that we make it as a tripartite arrangement between ourselves, BDF and GIZ to specifically look at youngsters starting out in the Kivu area. I've always been an enthusiastic cyclist. There's the Congo Nile Trail, which one can do on the lake, and we've seen some people attempt to get this going without much funding, and we've really looked at, once the tourists have come here, they've seen the mountain gorillas, they've gone to see chimpanzees, they've walked in the forest. What else is there to do? What do you do for the youngsters? So there's people that want to do touring, canoe trips on the lake, cycling in the area. But where do they go to for funding? No one has collateral. It's not like they own homes. It's not like they have cash. A lot of the people are university graduates that we're approaching. So we looked at a scheme where we could get guaranteed from BDF. We get technical assistance from GIZ, and the bank provides funding, and we take an element of risk on that.
Coming back to banking, what do you see has been some of the biggest challenge in the Rwandan market?
I think challenges are not just in the Rwandan market. I think it's within the banking industry. Changes in technology, the rate of regulatory change post the financial crisis, the focus on financing of terrorism and anti-money laundering. So you've got that, and then cybersecurity. So those are the areas where we are now vulnerable. If you looked at us, if you asked a bank manager 10 years ago, what were you worried about? They'll tell you they're worried about credit risk, market risk, operational risk. Now
but today it's really shifted.
It's shifted completely. You're looking at cyber risks. You're looking at anti-money laundering, and you're looking at governance breaches within your organization. You're still having to manage the other risks that I mentioned earlier, but those are now have raised to the fore. And I think that's any leader of a bank or board of a bank. Those are the areas that concern them the most.
Robin, you started off with the challenges, of course, saying something about technology, new technology advancements that have happened in the banking industry, and that's not just in Rwanda. That's something on a global perspective. But let's narrow it down back to I&M, just I&M. I think it was in September. that you experienced a system shutdown for a week or even more than that, and people were asking themselves, what has happened to the bank? What were you going through during that week, and how did you get out of it?
I think it's something that you don't wish to happen. I gave you the long technical scenario earlier on, but where we were fortunate is having people that we could rely on, customers that had trust in us, that we were communicating with. So we made sure that we were communicating to the customers, letting them know what went wrong, and at the same time systematically working in. We had to go almost line by line, customer by customer, payment by payment, do a reconciliation, make the payments, and we had some staff that never saw the light of day for a couple of days. But testament to great people, testament to loyal customers, and the system that eventually worked.
But what was the case?
It was. I don't think we need to go into the actual nitty-gritty, but it had to do. It was a simple line of code, one line of code, and it's the two systems never spoke to one another, and they all got posted into an account, and then we had to reconcile that account.
You've spoken about, of course, the growth for I&M the past 3 years, and this is commendable because of the team that you have and yourself being a leader in that position. How does one grow their market share? Just give us a glimpse at the strategic positioning of all the assets to actually make that happen.
So there's a couple of things that we've focused on in terms of ensuring that we have growth and growth within the market share. I'm glad to say that a lot of people claim to be number 2. We are number 2 in the market, but through organic growth. But that's focused on people, ensuring that first of all we have the right people. A lot of them you can't have your strategy be that we're going to do the same thing but with a bit more vigor. We focused on sales methodology. Focused on ensuring we had training for our staff, and they've made sure that we stay abreast from a product point of view. And then in product is bundled within the product has been our digital rollout and ensuring that we are relevant in the market from a channels perspective, so that non-traditional banking customers have got ways to communicate with the bank.
When you first listed on the stock exchange, of course, that was, I think, the first listing in the region in a very long time. But I need to understand, how did the market react to this particular IPO, of course, of I&M?
It was 200% oversubscribed. So there was a lot of interest, and it was. The international portion was fully subscribed. I think the work that we've done on the work that we not have done, the work that we did in terms of getting out on the road, not speaking to international investors, but taking it out to the market in Rwanda, going to having sessions in Wamagana, in Huye, in Rusizi, in Karongi, talking to local investors and what it means for them as an investment, and making them understand purchasing of shares as opposed to investing in a bank. I think that testament to that is the fact that we've got that many private individuals investing in the bank.
Finally, of course, anything more specific that you think could add value to viewers? Of course, understanding your company and understand your industry better. Of course, putting in perspective that you're Investor of the Year for the Business Excellency Awards. Just something that you think could give a better perspective about I&M and about the industry.
I think there's something that I was reading this morning, and something that we shouldn't take for granted, and that is the market. If you look at the growth within our market, and you need to, in terms of the Darwin theory of the survival of the fittest. If you look at Rwanda as a country, you cannot take away the total commitment of the population, the entire population, for growth. And that has a fundamental impact on the ability of your business to grow and your market to grow at the same time. And I think that's where we sit as a unique starting point for our business to grow and businesses within the country to go, is that tenacity and willingness to be great, or that pursuit of excellence.
All right, Robin, thank you very much for creating time and allowing us into your lovely house.
You're most welcome, and it was good to have you gentlemen in my home. And we look forward to talking soon.
All right, thank you so much. All right, Lawa Sulubi right here for this edition of Captains of Industry right here on CNBC Africa, First in Business Worldwide. For more, if you have any conversation that you want to add on to this, you can join us on Twitter. That's a CNBC Africa. My personal handle is Galwera4, and of course, the link will be definitely on our channel. That's at www.cnbcafrica.com. And for more episodes like this, be sure to stay tuned in to CNBC Africa, First in Business Worldwide.